Imagine this. You wake up one morning and the sky, it's just wrong. It's not blue. It's this murky, terrifying brown. And the lights all dim, like during an eclipse. But it's not the moon. It's wings. Millions, maybe billions of tiny wings blocking the sun. The air's thick and there's this sound, this intense humming. It's everywhere. It's total sensory overload, pure gut-level fear. You're basically standing inside a biblical plague, a massive locust swarm. So let's dig into this phenomenon.
Yeah, locusts. They've been terrifying humans for basically as long as we've been writing things down, capable of just, well, wiping out entire regions, famine, societal collapse, the whole deal.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, what are they? They're flying insects, technically part of the grasshopper family.
Okay, so if they're just sort of jazzed up grasshoppers, what makes them so uniquely dangerous?
It really boils down to one specific ability. There are thousands upon thousands of grasshopper species out there, but fewer than 20, less than 20 species can do this one thing: enter what scientists call the gregarious behavioral state.
Gregarious state.
Yeah. That's the switch. That's when they stop being these quiet, solitary, kind of camouflage little guys and turn into this coordinated, brightly colored, hypersocial army that swarms and migrates en masse.
And when we talk about the absolute worst, the most destructive migratory pest on Earth, I mean, the UN actually lists it as such. We're talking about one species in particular.
We are. That's the desert locust. You find it across huge swaths of Africa, Asia, the Middle East. And the scale, it's just staggering. Honestly, hard to wrap your head around. When these things swarm, it's not thousands, it's hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of insects. They could literally eat an entire region's crops in, well, minutes sometimes.
That destructive power is just immense. But sometimes the sheer spectacle is almost bizarrely memorable for other reasons. Like, wasn't there that incident in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, just recently, 2023?
Oh, yeah, the football match. A swarm just drifted right into the stadium during a game, completely covered the pitch.
Incredible. And Cristiano Ronaldo apparently still scored 4 goals.
He did, which is some serious professional focus right there, playing football in a blanket of locusts. But yeah, it seems like a wild story, but then you stop and think, what does that many insects actually mean? A big swarm can consume the food supply of like tens of thousands of people in one day.
Okay, so to really get that, we need to understand the mechanism. How does this creature, which is mostly just a quiet, solitary bug, how does it flip that switch, become this, technicolor, coordinated, destructive force?
It seems to be triggered by a sort of perfect storm of physical density and a chemical response. See, when conditions are right, maybe after good rains, their numbers increase, they get crowded, and they start bumping into each other constantly. And the research is incredibly specific here. It shows that physical contact just on the outside edge of their back legs, that's the trigger.
Just the back legs? That seems almost too precise for such a huge transformation.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that specific stimulus, that rubbing of the back legs, it's directly linked to this massive, almost instant spike in serotonin in their nervous system.
Serotonin, like the happy chemical for humans.
Sort of, yeah, but in locusts, it's the trigger for this gregarious phase. It basically overrides their solitary programming. They change color, they become intensely social, and they get this overwhelming urge to move together.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating for me. The movement itself, it's not just, hey, let's all fly this way. There's a more brutal mechanic driving them like 150 kilometers a day?
Oh, absolutely. It's driven by cannibalism.
Cannibalism.
Fiercely so.
Yeah.
The whole relentless forward movement of the swarm, a lot of it comes down to each locust trying desperately to eat the one directly in front of it, while at the same time flying as fast as possible to avoid being eaten by the one right behind it.
Wow, so it's a constant chase within the swarm itself. Eat or be eaten, pushing the whole mass forward.
Exactly. It's this incredibly efficient, if brutal, biological engine, powered by constant self-preservation.
A flying dog-eat-dog world. And that efficiency, that's what fueled the huge upsurge we saw recently, right? The 2019 to 2022 crisis. It started, weirdly enough, with too much rain.
That's right. It tracks back to 2018. There are these cyclones, Makunu and Lubin, that dumped an unusual amount of rain on the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter of Saudi Arabia.
Which is usually, well, empty, one of the driest places on Earth.
Precisely. And suddenly you have this temporary greening, this ephemeral oasis. The wet sand was perfect for egg laying, ideal conditions.
And because it's so remote, nobody noticed.
Exactly. It's vast, incredibly hard to access. So the locust population just started booming completely under the radar, and the growth is It's exponential. One generation can multiply the population by 20 times.
2010.
So they exploded in number, ate everything green in their little desert oasis, and then that scarcity, that crowding kicks in the serotonin. They turn gregarious, form swarms, and fly out, looking for food, which means, inevitably, human crops and pastures.
And when a swarm that big is heading your way, the sound alone must be terrifying.
People describe it as a sensory assault, a true harbinger of horror. It's a combination of two sounds, really. First, there's stridulation, that's the buzzing and clicking sound they make rubbing legs against wings, kind of like crickets, but on a massive scale. And second, there's trepidation. That's the sharper flapping sound of their wings snapping taut in flight. Millions of wings doing that together.
Mm.
It's this oppressive, inescapable wall of sound. You know destruction is coming.
And this particular upsurge, the 2019-2022 one, it became so bad, threatening millions across East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, because it wasn't just the locust's natural cycle, was it? It was like a perfect storm of bad luck.
It really was a kind of triple threat, as some called it. First, you had that lack of monitoring. The empty quarter is huge, 1,000 kilometers wide,
Yeah.
virtually inaccessible. So the population built up for months, maybe 9 months in secret.
Okay, so they bred unnoticed. Then what?
Then, factor two, the climate link. More cyclones in 2019. These didn't just bring rain. Their winds literally picked up these massive new swarms and blew them out of the Arabian Peninsula, across the Red Sea, straight into the Horn of Africa, Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya. And there's a strong suggestion that the increased frequency and intensity of these cyclones are linked to broader climate change patterns.
So climate change basically gave the swarms a free ride to new feeding grounds. And the final blow.
The third element, the pandemic factor. This is early 2020, COVID-19 hits, global travel shuts down, and that critically delayed the response. Pesticides, equipment, expert teams, they just couldn't get where they needed to go quickly enough. The locusts kept breeding, kept spreading while the world was locked down.
It's a nightmare scenario. This is where that global coordination becomes absolutely vital, right? Like the FAO, the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization. How do they even begin to coordinate across borders with something that moves so fast?
It's all about information. Data sharing is key. The FAO acts as a hub, connecting the national locust control centers in affected countries. These centers have locust information officers, and their job is to gather reports, ideally daily, about where swarms are, where breeding is happening, what control measures are being taken. The FAO compiles all that into a global picture, forecasts movement. So if a swarm leaves Kenya heading north, Somalia gets a warning, hopefully with enough time to prepare.
And that timing is just brutal because of their life cycle. It's incredibly fast.
Unbelievably fast. Early intervention is everything. You've got maybe 3 months total lifespan for an individual locust, but they hatch in about 2 weeks. They become adults, ready to fly and swarm about 6 weeks after hatching. And then just a few weeks later, those adults are laying their own eggs. If you miss a cycle, if you're delayed even slightly, the problem multiplies. By that factor of 20 again, it just explodes.
So you really want to hit them young when they can't fly yet, the hopper stage.
Exactly. That hopper phase, the first couple weeks after hatching, when they're essentially just walking, crawling nymphs, that's the prime time for spraying before they take wing. And we basically have 2 main types of spray. There are biopesticides, like one called green mussel, which is actually a fungus. That's the green approach.
Fungus, okay. Why is that greener?
Because it's highly specific. It really only affects locusts and grasshoppers. It's safe for other insects like bees, safe for birds, livestock, people.
That sounds perfect. Why isn't that the only thing used then?
The catch is time. It's slow. The fungus has to infect the locust, grow inside it. It can take up to 2 weeks to actually kill them.
2 weeks, when they're multiplying by 20 and moving 150 kilometers a day.
Exactly. 2 weeks is often just way too long. The swarm has moved on, laid more eggs, caused more damage.
Which forces countries facing, potential famine to turn to the faster option, even if it's riskier.
That's the tough reality. Chemical pesticides. They're generally cheaper and much faster, often kill locusts within a day or so of spraying. But the downside is significant. These chemicals are often broad spectrum. They kill beneficial insects, can harm birds, other animals, and they pose serious health risks to humans. Some reports indicated over 90% of the pesticides used during the recent upsurge in places like Kenya were known to be harmful to people and livestock.
That's just an impossible choice for governments, isn't it? Risk mass starvation now, or risk poisoning your land, your water, your people for years to come.
It's a terrible trade-off, which is why the focus really has to be on prevention, on early detection, trying to stop things before they reach that crisis point. And technology is helping there. There's this tool, Locust 3.
Right, I've heard of that. It's like an app.
Essentially, yeah. A handheld device or even a smartphone app that allows field officers, even citizens, to quickly record and transmit locust sightings with GPS data. Getting that early data, mapping potential hotspots before they explode, that's crucial. And honestly, these kinds of modern survey and control methods are why we haven't had a full-blown continent-spanning plague in, what, nearly 50 years now.
That's actually quite a success story when you think about it. We've managed to keep them contained to upsurges mostly. Still devastating, but not quite the historical plagues.
It is a success, but the threat level fluctuates, and managing the aftermath even of an upsurge is still a huge challenge.
Which brings us to this idea of, well, if life gives you locusts, maybe make locust aid. There was that startup in Kenya looking at upcycling them.
Right. A really interesting approach. They tapped into the fact that locusts become basically immobile at night when the temperature drops. So communities that had often just lost their crops could actually earn some income by going out at night and literally harvesting the locusts by hand off trees and bushes. People were collecting huge amounts, sometimes a ton in a single night.
A ton of locusts? What do you even do with that?
Well, this project bought them. The plan was to process them into animal feed or fertilizer. Locusts are incredibly high in protein, over 50%. Makes excellent feed for chickens or fish farms.
But wait, what about the pesticides if these areas were sprayed?
Yeah, that was the critical safety step. They couldn't just grind them up immediately. They had to test them, essentially. They'd hold the harvested locusts in sacks for a few days.
Like a quarantine.
Exactly. If the locusts died within that period, they were considered potentially contaminated from spraying and were processed into fertilizer. Only the ones that survived the holding period were deemed safe enough to be milled into high-protein animal feed.
That's incredibly pragmatic, turning the plague back into feed and income for the people most affected.
A really clever, circular approach in a desperate situation.
And speaking of slightly less pragmatic solutions, we have to mention the duck army, right? The internet rumor about China sending 100,000 ducks to Pakistan.
Oh, the duck army. That was great for a few days online. It started when some expert, I think on Chinese TV, suggested ducks could be like biological control agents, good locust predators. And the internet just immediately pictured this adorable, waddling army marching off to fight the swarm. It wasn't real, sadly, but it's a fantastic image.
Definitely a better image than chemical sprays. So putting all this modern stuff in context, humans have been dealing with this forever, haven't they? They're in the Bible, ancient Egyptian texts.
Since the dawn of writing, basically. Always seen as a curse, a divine punishment, total devastation. But if you want to talk scale, truly mind-boggling scale, you have to look at North America, historically. The Rocky Mountain locust.
Not the desert locust.
No, a different species, now extinct. In 1875, there was a swarm recorded called Albert's swarm. The estimates are just astronomical, somewhere between 3 trillion and maybe 12.5 trillion locusts.
Trillion, with a T.
Trillion. The swarm covered an area estimated at about 510,000 square kilometers. That's like half the size of Egypt, covered in locusts. Utter devastation.
I can't even picture that. 12 trillion insects. So what happened to them? That kind of power.
And here's the ultimate irony. That creature, the Rocky Mountain locust, arguably the most devastating insect swarm in recorded history. It was extinct by 1902, just over 25 years later.
Extinct? How? Not pesticides back then, surely.
No, not modern pesticides. It seems it was wiped out by the very thing it threatened.
Agriculture.
As settlers moved west, plowed the prairies, diverted rivers for irrigation, brought in cattle, they fundamentally changed the landscape. They just destroyed the locusts' breeding grounds, crushed the eggs laid in the soil, flooded nesting sites. They inadvertently destroyed the specific ecological niche the locust needed to survive between outbreaks. Wiped out by farming.
Wow. Driven to extinction by the plow. That's unexpected. Which brings us back to the desert locust today. We've gotten better at controlling them, preventing full plagues, but the underlying conditions might be changing again because of climate change.
That's the major concern, yes. Experts are predicting more frequent upsurges. That pattern of increased rainfall in desert areas, creating those temporary breeding grounds, that seems likely to continue, maybe even intensify. But perhaps the bigger worry is the temporal shift. Climate change is altering seasons. Growing seasons might start earlier and later.
Giving the locusts more time.
Exactly. Potentially enough time to squeeze in extra generations within a single year. Generations that wouldn't normally have had time to complete their life cycle. And each extra generation means another potential 20-fold multiplication.
More cycles, more growth, and potentially new territories.
That's also a possibility. Shifting weather patterns could push swarms further north than they typically range. There's concern about potential impacts in, say, southern Europe eventually, though major barriers like the Alps would likely still limit widespread movement into Central Europe.
Still, the thought of these massive swarms getting closer, it's just incredible. The sheer destructive potential packed into this tiny insect with only a 3-month life. We've done well using technology and coordination to hold the line for almost half a century, but it feels like climate change is shuffling the deck, maybe pushing these insects into new patterns, faster cycles.
It definitely seems to be increasing the background risk. And it forces us back to those really difficult questions. The Rocky Mountain locust story shows that even a creature of biblical scope can be wiped out, even accidentally. Yet the desert locust, while devastating in swarm phase, is still part of its native ecosystem. So as climate change potentially creates more frequent, more intense locust events, forcing them into new areas, how do we balance protecting vulnerable human populations, which might mean using risky chemicals, with the ecological reality? We've already proven we can extinguish such a creature. It really raises an important question about managing this threat moving forward, doesn't it?